The fluorescent lights of the maternity ward gave everything a pale glow, soft but unyielding. Camille Johnson lay in bed, her hair damp with sweat, her body heavy from the labor that had consumed her through the night. But none of that mattered. Now, in her arms, she held 3 tiny boys, each one a perfect piece of her heart made flesh. Thought they had Michael's sharp jawline, the unmistakable curve of his cheekbones, and her deep brown skin, warm and smooth against the hospital blankets. Dark curls clung to their tiny heads. Their breathing was quick, fragile, and new, the kind that made her want to shield them from the entire world. She looked over at Michael, expecting to see joy. He was their father, the man she had trusted with her love, her future, her life. He stood at the foot of the bed in a dark, tailored suit, his tie still perfectly knotted, as if he had walked in from a business meeting. But his face was wrong. No wonder, no smile, only a strange, cold stillness. His piercing blue eyes moved from one newborn to the next, then stopped. His jaw tightened, his lips pressed together. And then, without hesitation, he spoke. "They're black." The words were flat, as if naming a flaw. Camille blinked, confused. "Of course they are, Michael. I'm black." But he wasn't looking at her. He wasn't even looking at them anymore. She could see it, the calculation in his mind, the way his gaze shifted toward the wall, toward some distant place. He was already thinking of what this meant for him. The image he had built for himself, the spotless, polished life he guarded like a fortress, had no room for 3 black children. "I can't do this," he said finally, his voice colder now. "I can't be the father of these children." Something inside Camille splintered. Just hours ago, he had told her they were in this together. Now, he was walking away before he had even held them. Michael turned without another word. The door closed behind him. 25 years later, a brightly lit conference stage. 3 tall, confident black men in tailored suits stand at a podium. Their voices strong, their presence undeniable. Cameras flash. The crowd roars. In the audience, Michael Harrington sits frozen. These are his sons. And now, they are the ones passing judgment. Michael Harrington's life had been a carefully crafted performance. Born into an affluent white family, he had been raised to believe that image was everything. His father, a banker, measured success not in kindness or integrity, but in how others spoke your name in a room you weren't in. His mother taught him that reputation was delicate glass. Once cracked, it was impossible to repair. By 34, Michael had mastered the art of perfection. His suits were custom-made. His hair was always neatly trimmed. His smile was rehearsed but convincing. As the CEO of Harrington Technologies, his picture graced the covers of business magazines. His presence at charity galas was a given, and his net worth was whispered about with admiration. He lived in a world of polished marble floors, sharp business deals, and carefully chosen company. In that world, every choice had to protect the image. When Michael met Camille Johnson, it wasn't at a gala or a boardroom. It was at a quiet charity fundraiser he had attended reluctantly. She wasn't like the women he usually entertained. Camille had an energy that drew people in. She was young, ambitious, with warm brown skin and natural curls that framed her face in a way that made her eyes seem to shine. Their connection was immediate, but Michael kept her at arm's length, figuratively and literally. They dated in private. Dinners in quiet restaurants, weekends in secluded resorts. She never appeared beside him in public photographs. He told her it was to protect her from the brutal attention of the press. And Camille, trusting and in love, believed him. When Camille discovered she was pregnant, she felt a rush of fear and joy all at once. Triplets, the word itself sounded overwhelming. But Michael had taken her hand, assured her they would face it together. He promised he would be there. For months, she planned their future in her mind, a home filled with laughter. The 2 of them raising their boys together, teaching them the value of love and hard work. But the day they were born shattered that vision. Camille was exhausted from hours of labor, her body aching. but her heart soared as she looked at her sons. She wanted Michael to feel the same, to see what she saw. Perfection. Instead, his expression hardened the moment his gaze landed on their skin. They're black, he said, the words sharp enough to slice through her euphoria. She stared at him, confused. Of course they are, Michael. I'm black. But he was no longer in that room. In his mind, he was back in his boardroom, his social circles, his meticulously curated life. He saw whispers behind champagne glasses, deals lost, questions he didn't want to answer. In his world, a white man with 3 black children wasn't a father to be admired. He was a scandal to be avoided. I can't do this, he said finally, his voice steady, cold. I can't be the father of these children. Camille's heart pounded. Michael, they're your sons. I'm not putting my name on those birth certificates. She couldn't breathe. The monitors beeped softly in the background. The nurses moved quietly in and out, but all she could hear was the finality in his voice. Within hours, he had called his lawyer. A man in a gray suit arrived at her hospital room with a folder in his hands. Inside were papers, an agreement, a payout in exchange for her silence and for keeping Michael Harrington's name far from anything related to those children. Camille refused. The lawyer's voice was low, but the threat was clear. If you don't sign, Mr. Harrington will take this to court. He will fight for custody just long enough to destroy your life. You won't win. Michael stood behind the lawyer, his hands in his pockets, his gaze fixed on some invisible point beyond her. He didn't look angry. He looked done. She signed, not because she wanted to, not because she was afraid for herself, but because she understood in that moment that protecting her sons meant keeping them away from a man who had already decided they were a burden when she left the hospital with her babies. She walked out into the cold evening air without looking back. The city lights blurred through her tears. She told herself she would give them all the love he wouldn't, and deep down, she made a promise. Her sons would never need his name to define them. Raising 1 child alone is hard. Raising 3? Nearly impossible. But Camille Johnson didn't let impossible stop her. The first year was a blur of midnight feedings, stacked diapers, and an exhaustion that seeped into her bones. She returned to work at the hospital just weeks after giving birth, wearing her nurse's scrubs with sleeves that barely hid the ache in her arms. Her shifts often stretched to 16 hours. Some nights, she'd rest her head in the break room for 20 minutes before hurrying back home, praying the boys would still be asleep when she opened the door. Money was tight. The triplets, Noah, Isaiah, and Caleb, shared 1 bedroom. The cribs were secondhand. Their clothes were hand-me-downs from neighbors and coworkers. There was no nanny, no housekeeper, no backup. Just Camille, running on determination and love. She could have grown bitter. She could have told her boys every day how their father abandoned them. But Camille made a choice. Their lives would not be defined by his absence. From the time they could talk, she told them stories of greatness, of scientists, leaders, and activists who looked like them. She taught them that their skin was not a barrier, but a crown, when other kids might have gone to bed with lullabies. Noah, Isaiah, and Caleb went to bed with the voices of history: Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King Jr., Shirley Chisholm. They learned early that life would not hand them anything. The world would see their skin before it saw their minds, and some people would judge them for it. Camille didn't sugarcoat it, but she also didn't let it be an excuse. Your value, she would say, kneeling in front of them, is not determined by what anyone else sees. It's determined by what you build, what you give, and how you carry yourself. Years passed. By middle school, Noah had taken an interest in how things worked. He'd spend hours dismantling broken radios and toasters, then putting them back together. Isaiah found his passion in computers, teaching himself to code on an old laptop a neighbor had given them. Caleb, the most outspoken of the 3, showed a natural talent for leadership, always the one organizing group projects and settling disputes. Their mother worked double shifts to keep food on the table, but she never missed their science fairs or debate competitions. She was the loudest voice in the room when they won, and the steady hand on their shoulders when they lost. High school brought new challenges. The triplets were often underestimated. Teachers assumed their good grades were luck. Classmates made jokes about affirmative action. Some parents wouldn't let their kids visit the Johnson home. But the brothers learned to channel their frustration into drive. Noah poured himself into engineering, designing small robots out of spare parts. Isaiah built apps that helped students organize homework and study schedules. Caleb joined the student council, pushing for more funding for underfunded programs. It wasn't always smooth. They had arguments. They had nights when they wanted to give up, but they had each other. And they had Camille, the unshakable center of their world, by the time they graduated. All three had earned scholarships. They attended different universities but stayed connected, meeting on weekends to brainstorm ideas that blended their skills. It started as a simple dream to create technology that actually helped people like them, kids in underfunded schools, who never got the same tools as wealthier districts. That dream became a plan. And the plan became a company, Trinity Tech Solutions. Their first product was an AI-driven learning platform that adapted to each student's pace, designed specifically for schools with limited resources. They offered it at a fraction of the price of corporate alternatives. At first, no one took them seriously. Investors dismissed them, competitors mocked them. But the brothers didn't stop. They worked in cramped apartments, fueled by instant noodles and ambition. They pitched at small community events when they couldn't get into major conferences. Slowly, the results spoke for themselves. Schools that used their platform saw test scores rise, graduation rates improve, and dropout rates shrink. The turning point came when a small foundation awarded them a grant. That grant led to a pilot program in several districts. The pilot led to national attention. Within 5 years, Trinity Tech Solutions went from a kitchen table startup to $1 billion enterprise with offices across the globe. The triplets were no longer just promising young entrepreneurs. They were leaders, invited to panels, featured in Forbes' 30 under 30 list, and sought after by governments and NGOs. They became the kind of men their mother had always told them they could be. Camille, who had spent decades sleeping less than 4 hours a night, finally began to rest. She still worked part-time at the hospital, not because she had to, but because helping people had always been part of her. But now she lived in a house her sons had bought her, with enough space for the entire family to gather. And yet, for all their success, the boys never forgot the years in that cramped apartment. The smell of their mother's coffee as she headed out before sunrise. The sound of her voice telling them their skin was a crown. They built something more than a company. They built a legacy. Fate has a way of circling back. Sometimes quietly, like a letter in the mail. Sometimes loud, like a door slamming, for Michael Harrington. It came in the form of a crisp autumn evening and an exclusive tech summit in the grand ballroom of a luxury hotel. The chandeliers dripped crystal light onto polished marble floors. Waiters in black vests glided between tables, carrying trays of champagne. The air buzzed with the sound of deals being whispered and reputations being measured. This was Michael's world, a world he had mastered long ago. He arrived in a dark navy suit, shaking hands with executives, exchanging polite nods with investors. At 59, he had aged well. His hair was grayer now, but still neatly styled. His posture still carried the confidence of a man used to winning. What he didn't know was that the next name called to the stage would shatter that image. His voice boomed through the speakers. Please welcome our keynote speakers, the founders of Trinity Tech Solutions, Noah Johnson, Isaiah Johnson, and Caleb Johnson. At first, the names meant nothing. Then came the sound of applause, the flash of lights, and 3 tall young men walking onto the stage. Michael froze. They had the same deep brown skin as Camille. Her warm, steady eyes, and his face. The resemblance was undeniable. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. 25 years collapsed into a single thought. These are my sons. The brothers moved with the ease of men who belonged there. Noah, in a slate gray suit, began to speak about using an eye to close the education gap. Isaiah and Navy shared statistics on how their platform had transformed underfunded schools. Caleb, in charcoal, told stories of students who had gone from failing grades to full scholarships. They were confident, articulate, magnetic, and every time they smiled, Michael saw flashes of the boys they might have been if he had stayed. Then Camille walked on stage. She was radiant, her curls streaked with silver now, her posture proud. She joined her sons, her hand resting lightly on Caleb's shoulder. The audience roared with applause. Michael felt something sharp twist in his chest. This was the family he had rejected, now celebrated as visionaries. The speeches ended. The crowd rose to its feet. Cameras flashed. Michael hesitated, then made his way to the receiving line. Noah shook his hand politely, not recognizing him. Isaiah offered a professional smile, but Caleb paused. His eyes narrowed slightly, studying Michael's face. "You look familiar," Caleb said. Michael's throat tightened. "I don't think we've met. What's your name?" "Michael." "Harrington." The name hung in the air like a storm cloud. Camille, standing nearby, went still. Her smile vanished. Noah looked from his mother to Michael. "Wait, is this?" "Yes," Camille said quietly. "This is your father." It was as if the room shifted. The hum of conversation around them dimmed. The brothers' polite expressions hardened. "Our father?" Isaiah repeated, his voice sharp. "The man who abandoned us." Michael raised his hand slightly. I was young. I wasn't ready." "No," Noah interrupted, his tone like ice. You weren't willing. You weren't willing to be seen with 3 black sons." That's exactly what it was," Caleb cut in. "You were ashamed. And you chose your image over your children." Michael felt the weight of eyes on him. The guests nearby had stopped pretending not to listen. Some stood frozen, champagne flutes halfway to their lips. "I want to make it right," Michael said quickly. "I can help you." "I have connections," Caleb laughed. Short, sharp, without humor. "Help us? We're worth more than you are. You know what the best part is?" Noah said, his voice steady, but cold. "We built all of this without you. We learned what real manhood looks like, from a mother who never gave up. And from a community," Isaiah added, "that doesn't measure worth by skin color." Security drifted closer, sensing the tension. The brothers didn't move. Michael's mouth opened, but no words came. All the carefully constructed arguments in his mind, the excuses, the justifications, crumbled in the heat of their gaze. For the first time in his life, Michael Harrington was speechless. The receiving line had dissolved. Guests whispered behind hands, their eyes flicking between the famous tech founders and the man standing before them, the man who was now no longer just a name, but a story. Michael's face felt hot under the ballroom lights. Every instinct told him to defend himself, to control the narrative, to explain. But every word that formed in his mind sounded hollow even before it reached his lips. Julian's voice, the youngest of the triplets to speak. "Tonight was final. We needed a father 25 years ago. We don't need one now." The sentence landed like a gavel strike. Quiet, but absolute. Michael turned to Camille, searching for even a flicker of softness in her eyes, some sign that she might offer him a thread to hold on to. But she stood tall, beside her sons, her chin slightly lifted. She had carried 3 children into the world, worked herself to exhaustion to raise them, and watched them become the men they were. She owed him nothing. "You made your choice," she said evenly. "Now live with it." The silence that followed was thick, charged. It wasn't just between them. It filled the whole room. You could feel it in the stillness of the guests, in the way the clinking glasses and polite laughter had vanished. Security stepped forward, one on each side of Michael. They didn't grab him. They didn't have to. The message was clear. As they walked him toward the exit, the brothers turned back to greet their well-wishers, shaking hands, smiling for cameras. Camille stayed with them, her hand resting proudly on Noah's back. The crowd's applause swelled again, this time not for Michael Harrington. Not for the man who once commanded rooms and headlines, but for the family he had walked away from. The Ballroom doors closed behind him. Outside, the autumn night was colder than he expected. The sharp air bit at his cheeks, and the city's noise, car horns, laughter, the low rumble of buses felt distant, like it belonged to another world. Michael stood on the hotel's marble steps for a moment, unsure where to go. For decades, he had measured his worth by the weight of his handshake, the size of his bank account, the circles he could enter without question. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, he had been measured by something else entirely, and found lacking in the glow of the streetlights. He imagined what it might have been like if he had made a different choice. He pictured himself in the front row, cheering as his son spoke. He imagined introducing them to his colleagues as his proudest achievement. He saw a life where Camille smiled at him, not with bitterness, but with the warmth they once shared. But that life was gone. A gust of wind swept down the street, carrying the sound of the ballroom's muffled applause as the doors opened briefly. To let in a guest, Michael turned, instinctively glancing back. But the doors closed again before he could see inside. He realized then that what he had lost was not just his sons, not just their respect, but the chance to ever be the man they could be proud of, and that was a debt no amount of money could ever repay.